Subsequent to my first adventure, and I did regard it as an adventure at the time, although the definition of adventure for me changed rather dramatically over the next 20 years. I was based in Detroit at the law firm, but spent, I would say, a majority of my time in New York in the business sense. My client had an apartment there and offices. And so it eventuated that he had a number of contracts of various kinds to do, mostly purchase and sale of chemical commodities, petroleum derivatives. And so I worked on those, and some worked out, some didn't. The funniest one was when I was dealing with a lawyer, a New York lawyer, who invited me to his office to kind of finalize a contract. And the client called me in that guy's office and said, "Bob, whatever you do, do not sign that. I can't do that deal. I have another deal I want to do. I cannot do that deal. So I don't care what you have to do. Jump out a window. But do not sign that." And we were to signing. That was what we were going to do. So I thought, oh, geez, what do I do now? Well, I think calmly, probably not, but I think calmly, gathered my papers and sort of sorted them and organized them like I was just doing what a lawyer would do, and got up and ran out the door. That's what I did. I ran, and the shock gave me enough time to get away, got into an elevator just like the movies, and he ran after me screaming about the deal. And I said, "We're not doing the deal." So I went down to the office building, was between 56th and 57th, I remember. There was an arcade. And I chose which way to go, and he was right on my tail, running. Here we are running through the streets of New York with my briefcase flying and his whatever. He's screaming at me, "I'm going to kill you," and all this other stuff. And we were getting looks, needless to say. But I managed to get away, I don't know how, and I slowly got back to the client's office, and I said to him, "Don't ever do that to me again." He said, "Why? You did a beautiful job." He said, "You're very good at that." I sort of laughed at that point. But we did many deals, nothing as dramatic as that. Needless to say, I ran into that lawyer many years later. He didn't recognize me, I recognized him. But after a period of, we took trips to London and back and forth, and I'd always fly the Concorde because the client wanted me to. And there was a clique of clients in New York, I guess other places too, who wanted to brag that their clients flew the Concorde. "Oh, my client is so fancy, he has to fly the Concorde, and it costs me all this money." And of course, they're the ones that bought the tickets. So anyway, I went back and forth many, many times. And at one point, I don't know whether it was then in the mid-70s or later, I had the record on the Concorde. I think it was 30 round-trip flights, something like that, or 30 one way, whatever. And that was far surpassed later, very quickly. And they gave me a set of Concorde china and crystal and cutlery and napkins and things, which I took as a present to my son, who's on the other side of this camera, and it's gone. So goodbye to that. Anyway, what would I do with it? I don't know. Anyhow, after all this back and forth to London, and it was really only London we went to, that was the base for all the operations we had. The client asked me to go to Taiwan. and meet with a dealer in, a broker, not a producer, I don't believe, manufacturer, no, of styrene monomer, which is the powdered substance that goes into styrene foam and other kinds of plastics. It's a base for plastics. May have this all wrong, but that's what I remember, which is really not used much anymore. So I landed in Taipei after a very long flight. I always flew first class because he wanted me to do that so I'd be rested when I got there. But let me tell you, first class was not like it is today. It was just a bigger seat. And more booze and food, which I didn't want anyway. Anyhow, not complaining. Got to Taipei and went to whatever hotel I was staying at. And the next morning took a conveyance, I'll call it. We would think of it more like a Jeep, I guess, and not the new Jeeps, sort of open Jeep, to Kaohsiung, I believe, which is in the south of Taiwan. I was about to say, I think it's still there. Of course it's still there. And that was the industrial area and shipping port, as I understand it, and so forth. I haven't checked back on it in many, many years. So we arrived at the office of this gentleman, and he conducted me, and he was very gracious, as the Chinese are, as the Taiwanese are. And we sat down, he showed me samples of his styrene monomer. And again, I didn't know how to judge it. So I kind of fingered it, and I said, oh, this is very nice. And it was so hot. You can't imagine, it's very tropical. And the perspiration, no sweat, was pouring off my face. So I had my blue lawyer suit on, of course. And he said something to his secretary, which was to the effect, get that fan, turn it on for Mr. Leidig, now. Very gracious lady, sort of bowed to me and set the fan up in front of me and turned it on. And of course, it hit the styrene monomer pile first. And all the styrene monomer powder went all over me. Oh, he was panicked and he was yelling at her, and I kept saying, no, it's nobody's fault, I'm fine, and blah, blah, blah. And I guess I reacted quickly enough that I had shut my eyes. It wasn't in my eyes. And I don't believe it's a dangerous substance anyway, but so they cleaned me off as best they could, brushed me and fanned me and all sorts of things. And I had to say to him that I didn't know whether he could produce enough or acquire enough to supply our needs. And I said, now, it has nothing to do with the fan. And he kind of smiled, sort of sickly, because he was afraid about that. And I said, but I will come back to you and let you know. I'm thinking in my mind that perhaps you could supply part of the need in a certain country and we would use someone else for the rest. Oh, that made him very happy. He smiled and so forth, and we shook hands 75 times. And I left and went to the Kaohsiung airport, which was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay. And there were armed guards in there with Kalashnikov rifles or something or other, wandering around. That was way before the United States caught on to the security problems. 30 years, probably. And I was shocked to see that. You know, as an American, we're naive. I had never seen that before. Subsequently, I saw it in Italy. So I thought, oh, the new normal. Anyway, I was about to go through baggage check. It wasn't security check. It was just checking your bags. When I heard on the intercom, in Chinese, of course, and I don't mean to insult the Chinese, but I'll kind of sort of say, they said, ja, 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 Leidik, la, 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 and repeated it. And I thought, did I hear my name in Kaohsiung Airport in Taiwan, in the extreme south of the island, thousands of miles from the United States? And I thought, I think I did. Whereupon I heard it a third time. So I thought, yep, heard it, don't know how. Maybe the flight's canceled. So there was an information desk, and the lady spoke pretty good English, as I recall. And I said, there was just an announcement that asked for Leidik. Oh, yes. Are you Leidik? Yes, I am. Well, then you go over to this phone and just tell them you're Leidik, and they'll tell you what they need. So I did. So I picked up the phone, and they connected me. And lo and behold, on the other end was a young woman who was the client's secretary who ran the whole show. Enormous energy. She used to jump over the coffee table in the den to get the phone on one ring, because she had been taught at her secretarial school that that was required, as well as gloves and a hat, although she didn't do that anymore. Anyway, she said, well, hi, Bob, it's so-and-so, how are you? I said, what? How did you find me here? I wasn't intending to leave from Kaohsiung. Well, I figured out this route and that route, and you're on your way here and there. And I thought I'd try. And I said, well, you got it. And he said, well, your route's been changed again by the client. You're to go to London, I think, rather than, no, I don't think that's right. You're go to Hong Kong directly, rather than just a stop in Hong Kong and then go to London. Or whatever the change was. Whatever it was, it's fine with me. The tickets were waiting, I just got on the plane. So I said, fine, so how have you been? Oh, as crazy as ever. You're doing well on your trip? Oh, yes, I have a little styrene monomer on my blue chute. And she laughed. And that was it. I got my new tickets, which were ready and waiting. This is the old days. And I went up, I checked my bags, went up to the gate, and got on the plane for Hong Kong. I went to Hong Kong. And there were always Boeing 747s in those days. I understand they're phasing them out for an even bigger plane, but it was a miracle to me. They were huge. And I always flew up front. Although again, it wasn't what it is today. People have cabins and all sorts of things. So we landed in Hong Kong. I got off and I forget where I stayed, and I met with some people, I think, I don't really recall, about possibility of supply, and did my work, and got back on the plane. It turned out to be the same plane. The crew had stayed over in Hong Kong long enough to meet the requirements. And they all said, oh, hi, hi, hi. I was becoming an old face. So we took off, normal. We flew over India, where it was naturally breathtakingly hot coming off the deserts. And somebody can explain it better than I can, but the fuel either evaporated or became very thin, whatever happens to fuel. So the amount of fuel in the wings to get to London was not enough. So the pilot announced that we were perfectly safe, but he wanted to set down in Tehran, Iran, to get more fuel, to top the tanks, if you will. I thought that was great. I had never been to Tehran, although I knew that there were some tough things going on with the revolution. I didn't know the stage in which it was at the time. So we landed, normal course things, and pull up in an open area where they pull up manual steps. They don't have jetways. And I looked out, and it was maybe the second seat up front, and I sort of craned my neck and looked out, and there was a whole gaggle of Persians, Iranians, running towards the plane. The women in unbelievable jewelry and fur coats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, carrying their life on their back, I guess. That's what happens in revolutions and changes in governments. We haven't had that here yet. So they all clambered up the steps and came right into first class. And the purser said, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have found, we think, enough seats for you throughout the plane. If I can take you one at a time, I can show you." And one lady, in a very strident but polite, erudite voice, said, "Oh no, do you not understand that we only fly first class?" And I thought, oh, lady, you've got $1 billion worth of jewelry on. You want to get out of this revolution. Whew. So the purser said, "Well, I don't think that's possible. We're completely full up front." I certainly was going to volunteer in my seat. Anyway, after a while, it sort of cooled down. I think the people realized that, okay, we got a seat. We're going to London. Let's not worry about it. So it settled down, but towards the end of that whole crazy episode with all those people, and they became very polite. They were very, very nice. I happened to look out the side of the plane, which it had been, and there was a baggage cart, not the cart, but the tractor that pulls it, coming straight towards the plane. I didn't think anything of it. They zoom all over an airport. But it kept coming and not changing course. And I thought, if that guy doesn't turn, he's going to hit the front wheel. Sure enough, he did hit the front wheel. He was a revolutionary, I guess. I don't know. But fortunately, that front wheel was very strong. It bent, and they had to replace something. But they dragged him off, and nobody ever saw him again. But that was sort of exciting, just knowing, uh-oh. Anyway, we finally were able to take off. Because of the change in timing and fuel and all these other things, the captain decided to put down in Rome, which had originally been on the flight manifest or schedule, but had been taken off and put back on because of all these wild changes. So he said, "We are going to stop in Rome, but it will be a stop. We'll get refueled and we'll take off for London." But I was so exhausted by then, just drained, that I decided to get off in Rome. I'd never been there. And coincidentally, I learned that I was sitting next to a fellow, and we weren't talking. I don't like to talk to people next to me. But I don't know what started it. But I was on my way to Detroit. Oh, so was he. He said there's going to be a wedding there, which I'm in. And I can't remember who it was. But it's people we knew, and we were invited to the wedding, and Paula and I went. And I said, "Oh, you don't mean the so-and-so wedding?" And he said, "Of course, I'm going to be a groomsman." So there you have it. You get on a plane in Hong Kong, you sit with a guy for days, you go through all this, and you find out you're going to the same spot. This has happened a number of times, not quite that specific. Anyway, we got to Rome. I got off the plane, dragging, and I asked for recommendations on hotels, and there are fabulous hotels there. And someone said, "You know, one of the nicest places to really rest, there's some very, very exquisite 5, 10-star, I don't know, hotels in the city. but I think you'd enjoy being up in the hills. The air is good. I said, fine, fine. So she recommended the I was going to say Consigliere Hilton. It's not the Consigliere. It's the I can't remember. Well, it was a Hilton, but not like a Hilton you think of. It was spread across the top of one of the Palatine Hills, I guess, and had a view of all of Rome, all the other of the 7 hills and the city and everything, the Colosseum, the Forum, I also almost said Fortnum and Masons, and everything else you could possibly imagine. All of Italy right there. And they had a postcard pull-out on the desk, which was folded, and you'd pull it out, and it showed the entire view all around the hills. So you could stand right in front of the door, had a big balcony, and go from one end of this, a panorama view, and it noted each of the monuments, the places of historic interest, etc. It was fabulous. I kept that where it is now, who knows? And I was hungry, but didn't feel like eating. I didn't know. So I rang the bell. We did that in those days. It was much more chic than calling room service. Room service! No, you ring the bell, and there is a floor waiter just for your floor. And he came, very nice guy, an older Italian man. I explained, I just want something, I became Italian, I want something light, you know? And I became whatever nationality of the country in which I found myself. But he said, don't look at the menu. I will take care of it. I know just what you want. I said, okay. So he disappeared and later came back with zuppa de minestrone. It was different than I'd ever had. Certainly wasn't Campbell's. Very light and refreshing. And a bufala mozzarella salad, as I recall. Oh, and pasta, of course. Hello, you're in Italy. It's law. A little bowl, tiny little bowl. And some other things, I don't remember, and some red wine. So I ate that, and he said, once you finish this, you get yourself in bed and just sleep. I will make sure nobody disturbs you. And he stood there the whole time serving me, which is European. And so finally I finished. He took the plates away and bid me good night. And I hope I gave him profuse thank yous because it was just perfection. And I got in bed, and whatever happened after that, I don't know. But I woke up in the morning and had to go back to the airport. And I vividly remember the shutters on the windows of these little streets, which were apartments on the upper stories above the stores and offices. And they were wood or metal in all kinds of colors. I particularly remember aqua and blue. And there were, at this hour, it was probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't know. And that was time for siesta. And I think it's the same in Italian as it is in Spanish. Whatever it was time to nap. So I was going down these streets, and these ladies were hanging their heads out the door with kerchiefs on and talking to their neighbors and looking around, checking out what was going on. And then they would firmly shut the shutters, which allowed air, they were louvered, in because it was quite warm, but it was dark. And then eventually I came down to the bottom of the hills, and right in front of me, I swear that waiter told the cab driver to do it, was the Colosseum. Another awe-inspiring moment. It seems a little smaller than I imagined it, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't. Just this enormous circle. I did not tour it. I've seen shows about it with lion cages in the basement and all this other stuff. But I was mesmerized by it. And we went by the Roman Forum and then up on the hill behind the Roman Forum, I believe, was where the Caesars lived, and there was still something of their palazzo, whatever, left. But we made a little tour around, went by the Spanish Steps and that sort of thing. A quick tour, your 10-minute guide to Rome. I've always wanted to go back. It's unlikely I will now. But the Romans are very enthusiastic, very cheerful, very encouraging, very friendly. They'll do anything for you. So we went to the airport, and I went to London, and that was that.